truly honored to welcome a modern Renaissance man who rose from humble beginnings to lead two Fortune 500 companies, turned disruption into opportunity, and now on a mission to prove that education is the ultimate form of freedom. What's an inspiration for me, and based on Jim's story, is that he grew up in a three-room house without plumbing in Grafton, Massachusetts, and he went on to become the CEO of 7-Eleven, where he engineered one of the most successful retail transformations in history. He's also this was the former CEO of Blockbuster through the storm of digital disruption and a best-selling author and a founder of Education is Freedom Foundation, who already raised hundreds of millions of dollars to open doors for students who need it the most. His life and philosophy also built on a simple but powerful idea: change equals opportunity. Jim, it's a major honor. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be with you here today because I know just a little bit about your story, and you embody so much of what I tried to communicate in the book "Education is Freedom." So I think between you and I, we can inspire a lot of people, and I hope that's what your podcast will do.
No, thank you very much. Like I mentioned to you before, it's a major opportunity for me to speak to you. And I want to ask this first question. Listen to the introduction. Who is the real Jim behind this, the status and behind the philanthropist? Who is the real Jim?
It's a good question. You'd probably be surprised that the real Jim um, is an introvert. Um, I was tested once in my early corporate career. I think it was a test called the Briggs Myers or something, and they test your where you stand on the scale of introvert versus extrovert and detail oriented versus someone who flies at a different level. And the study came back and it said I was introverted. And I thought, well, that must be a mistake because, of course, in my job as a CEO, I'm out always making speeches and meeting people. And I remember going home and telling my wife that I tested as an introvert, and she said, "Yeah, of course." I said, what do you mean? I'm not an introvert." And she said, "No, you are. You're not naturally comfortable around people. If we go into a party and a social event and you don't know anyone, you'll be hiding behind me, and you'll sit in a corner by yourself because you don't want to bother anyone." And and interestingly, I became aware, and I went back to the people that administered the test, and I said, "Well, my wife agreed that I'm an introvert. Help me understand this, because it doesn't make sense that I can do my job as a CEO and also be an introvert." And it was a very interesting thing they said. They said that you have learned that the ways of being an extrovert. You studied others who were outgoing, who were CEOs, who had different roles, and you emulate that behavior, but it doesn't come naturally to you. You had to learn it, and you had to have the discipline to take you out of your natural introverted self and to be able to be out in the public. And as a result, you basically, when you're in character, Jim Key is the author, Jim Key is the CEO, you're very extroverted. You can stand in front of 10,000 people. But you also know in your heart that you're kind of shy and not comfortable just being out there talking to people. And the reason that is such, I think, a good example for everyone is we all have our personality and we all have our own personal limitations, but we can all overcome them if we understand what they are, if we study ourselves first, and if we work to try to overcome those limitations through knowledge, through education, right? So yeah, that's me. Not not the guy you see giving a fancy speech on stage or in an interview or on screen, but the regular me is just a regular guy who just learned how to learn.
Thank you very much. You gave us a glimpse of the inside perspective. Do you think education changed your life?
Totally. Totally. And and it's still changing my life today. The reason that you're talking with me now is that I have created a global presence. In order to create a global presence outside of the role of CEO of a major global company, I had to learn social media. I had to learn how to communicate in this brand new form of communication. And so that learning now reached you, allowed me to get out there with a public presence internationally, reached you, and then you reached out to me via my website. All of this came from me learning and changing and being able to learn how to adapt to communicating in a brand new environment. Something that I didn't grow up with or wasn't comfortable with. So, yeah, from the time I was a child, education took me out of poverty and let me escape the perceptions that people had of me because everyone told me what I can't do because I had no money, and told me how I can't live because I didn't have opportunities. Education was the way that I was able to escape the reality that others were trying to put me in a box and to do virtually anything I wanted to do. And I'm still learning today how to be able to expand my horizons through knowledge, through education.
No, but that's amazing, Jim. I want to ask you what early experiences or influences who planted the seed that education is the ultimate form of freedom, and how did that shape the foundation of Education is Freedom Foundation?
It started really with my dad. My father never made it past the sixth grade, and was a factory worker, a hardworking man. And he wanted more for me. He always wanted better for me. And he used to tell me, I don't know how, I don't know the path to tell you to be successful, but I want you to have freedom that I don't have. He never said, I want you to go make a lot of money. I want you to be rich. None of that. What he wanted for me is the freedom to be myself, to achieve whatever it is my heart wanted to achieve. And he knew that somehow, some way, those who had freedom had education. They were, because of their knowledge, able to escape the bonds of a job or a career that kept you limited in a certain geography or in a certain place. And he knew that through knowledge and education, I could continue to expand my horizon and have the freedom and travel all over the world, which I do today. So it was great advice from someone who didn't know how to tell me how to get there, but he knew the importance.
Do you did you have mentors in your life that gave you advice and that shaped your leadership abilities and that changed your perspective?
Oh, of course. The first mentors that I'll share, and ones that are often overlooked, is the influence that a teacher can have on you. And, we tend to take our teachers sometimes for granted. They're just there, and, we sometimes ignore them. But the reality is, I still to this day remember little things, tiny things that a teacher would do that made me believe in myself. So, for example, I remember a math exam that a teacher had when I was probably in the fourth grade, fifth grade in school, very young child at the time. And she gave out little awards for those who got the best grades on this math exam. And I remember going home and saying, I want one of those awards, and studying really hard and coming back and taking the exam. And I got it, and it was a little basket filled with candy. And it was nothing. It was nothing. But to me, that was like winning the World Cup. It was such a big deal that I was able to accomplish something and to stand out among my peers as one of the best in the class. And I cherished that little gift for the longest time. Um, it was those kinds of things that teachers would do, a little recognition, in class. Jim, Jim Keys, you are one of the top three students in this exam, or a good grade at the end that I could take home and share with my parents that I got all A's on my report card. Um, those were the small things that inspired me to believe in myself. And those teachers who offered that reassurance ended up not being a mentor in the traditional fashion, but it turns out they were so influential in helping to direct my career and my path.
Jim, it's very interesting and very inspiring because you're talking about positive reinforcement. And I agree with you the role that the teacher plays. And for me personally, just to let you know that I was also a specialist teacher where I taught autistic students, neurodiverse students. And for me, the for me it was always about making lessons innovative, inspiring them, and you know, um, our mother used to say that when I asked her, she was also a specialist teacher by trade, and I asked her, how do you connect with students? And she told me that the best tool is through a sense of humor, because that is how you can get them engaged. But also, it's actually quite sad in the field of neurodiversity because majority of the neurodiverse individuals in South Africa generally, look, it's all over the world, but generally there's a lack of support for these individuals. The highest suicide rate of a neurodivergent person in South Africa is 35 years old due to depression, due to anxiety, um, and it all goes back to education.
Mhm.
And I remember specifically when I was in grade two, a teacher tied up my hands because I stimming in class, and that was for me a very traumatic experience that affected my perception. But if I think back to it, if a teacher was more understanding, a teacher that was more equipped, maybe had training on it, and specifically were more than willing to come out of their comfort zone, then you would have made a significant difference. And I agree with you about education because it can it can create such a positive motivation.
It can, and it's interesting that you should mention the um, challenges that you face as a neurodiverse student, because up until the last 20 or 30 years, we didn't really understand learning disabilities at all. And we, unfortunately, too often would take someone with a learning disability and push them aside or not provide the proper incentives. But here's the reality. The interesting thing is, and I know very little about autism or neurodiversion diverse individuals and how they learn, but I do know examples that I've seen myself, that I have friends who perhaps they had struggled with reading comprehension or even speaking, as in your case, and then sometimes they'd sit down at a piano and be an absolute virtuoso, you know, be able to create amazing things. And if you think about it, wait a minute, music is math. And if they can play the way they can play, could they also be a mathematician somewhere deep in the back of their mind? And so I think there's so much that we can learn about each other by being open to the idea that education and finding the right form of education is the pathway for anyone to be able to excel. That's why I get excited about technology today, because I think technology can help find those learning pathways and provide individualized learning in ways that we've never seen before. Because in the past, we'd have a person like me trying to teach a person like you, and I may not be able to relate to how you learn. So you'd get frustrated with learning, and I would get frustrated with teaching. And the outcome, maybe not so good. In the future, if the teacher can access tools that will better understand the way you're learning and be able to teach in a more effective fashion, to be able to have you respond and accelerate your ability to learn in that way, I think it can change so much. That's why I get really excited about the future of technology in education and how it can literally, in my mind, could we wipe out any learning disability? Could we ultimately say, you know what? Every human on this planet has a learning disability, and it could take a range of forms. I'm sure I have learning disabilities. I just don't know what they are. But could we be able to better identify what every human's limitation is when it comes to learning and be able to better address it so that we can accelerate their ability to excel?
Mr. Keys, it's very interesting what you're saying because look, AI has changed, is changing the world as we know it. It's moving on with a rapid pace. And for instance, it was interesting what you were saying because my wife, Sammy, is autistic dyslexic. She's turning 30 this year. She can't read and write. And she was immediately excluded when she was younger, at a very young age in the education system. And basically, our mother, my mother, Miss Kim Hicks, who I regard as a mother as well, she basically um, tried to stimulate Sammy as much as possible. And she referred to it as the University of Life. And the intelligence of Sammy, to be able to wisdom is quite astonishing as well. She's got different abilities. She can do word searches. Although she's a semi-verbal autistic dyslexic, she can, she can cope and she can do majority of the things. But what's quite significant and comes back to AI, I got these Meta AI glasses, which I imported from the US.
Mhm.
And you know, for the first time ever, when we got it, it was the first time ever that she could be able to look at the menu. The glasses would scan it, it will be able to read it for her. And that changed everything for her as well.
Yeah,
Just shows
yeah.
you.
That's a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that because I'm trying to advance an idea that we would harness the power of AI and these kinds of tools to be able to make available to everyone everywhere in the world the best learning tools that are available. The example I'm using is life before iOS or Android. There were tools that existed, but they weren't available to everyone and they weren't interoperable. They didn't easily allow you to go back and forth and they didn't have privacy and security. What I would love to do, my dream, is to have a tool like this that every child anywhere on the planet could pull up a screen like this and have access to the best literacy tool, math tool, science tool, and have the AI tutor built in to this tool so that, as in the example of the Meta glasses, it would be individualized content delivery based on the way the person is receiving that information and responding best to it. So the AI tutor could actually help understand how you're learning and modify the way the content's being presented to you based on the way you're best receiving it. Imagine if we could provide that tool to every child on this planet and what could happen if we elevate humanity in a way we've never seen before, literally eliminating learning disabilities and letting everyone have the power of learning. Can you imagine a world where that's possible?
You know, now I can, uh, you know, and for me, you know, to be able to get to these classes, because look, it was quite astonishing. It was quite astonishing for me to hear because look, South Africa is unfortunately 30 years behind with tech, and based on my international advocacy, and non-profit organizations that I'm currently involved in, I basically I got a lot of information with regards to technology and how it can be used as accessibility tool. And unfortunately, in South Africa, these classes were not available. No optometrists heard about it. I phoned Meta internationally. They said it's not available in South Africa, um, because they don't see a market for it. And I basically got it here, um, where I'm making use of VPN to be able to use it. And yes, it costs a little bit of a fortune to be able to, to be able to use it. But do you know how it changes her life because she uses it? And it's the stuff that you do, to be able to be semi-independent. And that's why education and AI can be used together, and it can change the world. It can make things accessible for everyone.
Absolutely. And I come from a world of scale. 7-Eleven has 85,000 locations across the globe. I know the power of scale. So something that costs $200 million or something that costs uh, $200 for an individual, if we buy it in scale for 50 million people, the same item that costs $200 could be provided for $10 because we have the advantage of scale. And that's what I'm trying to bring to education, to be able to say there are tools today, meta glasses, some of the learning systems that are out there, AI tutors. These tools are only affordable today to those students or those schools that can pay a very high price. But if we provide a platform that is available everyone all over the world, then the scale of being able to provide those tools to hundreds of millions of young people could make the cost go down to almost nothing, to the point where anyone could afford this. Or in my case, what I'm encouraging is governments like the United States to adopt this and make these tools available to everyone in the United States. And if I can have that happen here, then my dream would be to say, now, instead of sending weapons to other countries, let's send education to other countries. Let's open this tool up and make it to everyone, available to everyone in South Africa or everyone in the continent of Africa, and have them have access to the very best learning tools. Imagine the possibilities of peace on this planet if we eliminate ignorance from the planet.
Sure,
Very
that
possible.
could be amazing. It's definitely possible. And let me tell you as well, what you mentioned, I would love to form part of that dream, and work with you on this. And I would even become an ambassador for it.
I
you
would
know,
love to have
uh,
you as an ambassador because you're a living example of what's possible. You know, 50 years ago, people may have said, we won't even try. And you could have spent the rest of your life with an inability to speak, right?
mm,
Today, people are realizing that anything is possible. And you're a great example of what's possible. You've got a PhD. When a few years ago, people may have said he would never have a PhD, right?
mm.
Now you're teaching others. Now you have an opportunity to give back and to prove to people exactly what's possible. So I think that's a beautiful story. And I'd love to have your help and be able to share it.
No, I think it will contribute a lot towards this inequality that we see. Um, because look, in my field, that in the neurodiversity field, I took on initiative where I basically do a lot of international audience advocacy, and I get a lot of questions from parents, from people, to give them opportunities, and I help people. I'm a giver. That's my personality.
Mhm.
Um, that's who I was, who I am, and that's who I always be. And I am someone that will basically technically neglect myself for other people, and I feel always bad when I can't help so many people. And for me, I changed initiative. I started an initiative where I took on social media through a page called Special Need Cafe, where I basically uh, shared a journey where I started an initiative to write a national autism strategy for South Africa, where I basically write a strategy which governments and civil society adopted so that we can provide inclusive education and opportunities for everyone in civil society regarding education in a working force. And we are currently in phase 2 of it. And I'm working closely with a fellow autistic adult from Australia that's currently also assisting me with this. But you know, for me, it's all about making sure that it's sustainable for generations to come. Because look, like I mentioned to you before, we've got the highest suicide rate of neurodivergent people in the world. And like I mentioned to you before, the living age of a neurodiverse person is 35 years old due to depression, anxiety, and I do not like to see it, and that's why, I've got this perception that, you need to fight for everything that you want. And look,
Mhm.
I've been fight throughout my life, I've been fighting for inclusion, accessibility, and yeah, we are basically need to hold governments accountable.
Yeah, yeah. But the whole point is you shouldn't have to fight, you know?
Exactly.
It should be able to come easier. And I think the answer really is, and this is what I'm encouraging all governments to do, is realize that education really is freedom. This is not just a slogan. It's not just a book title. It truly is, because I mean, step back and you think about how governments complain about having to spend so much money to help people, to eliminate crime, to uh, have health care. All of this comes back to, if you help people help themselves, and you can provide the foundation, the tools to let everyone educate themselves and lift themselves up, you eliminate half of the healthcare expense, because the educated take care of themselves. They have they have better ability to eat properly and live, a life that's less dangerous, etc. You eliminate crime. Not, maybe you don't ever eliminate it, but you dramatically reduce crime, because you're giving people opportunity to make money in positive ways, to take care of themselves. Terrorism. Think about terrorism. It comes back to the lack of opportunity. If I have nothing to live for, why not throw my life into, a terrorist act? None of this makes any sense, but it's all curable if we can get governments to see that the investment in educating our people really is the path to freedom across the planet and for a much healthier world that we live in.
Yeah, definitely. Coming back to the internet, I wanted to ask you, because you've collaborated with a lot of figures like Mr. Beast, on scholarships and emphasized as an internet for edtech vision. So, what excites you most about this initiative and the potential for innovative formats to scale education access globally? And where do you see the biggest opportunities right now?
Well, as I mentioned, I am inflicted with a worldview that's very different, because when you run large corporations all over the world, you realize what's possible when you look at the world as a global opportunity. And that's what I do. I see one human race. I don't see all of the problems that we face, because if we have this one human race able to access learning and able to elevate themselves, I think humanity can be so much better off. Now, the tools exist, and this is why I'm excited about the time we're living in right now. Technology has advanced to the point that we have tools that are out there, they're available, but no one's thought about the possibilities of, what if we pull all these tools together? An example: Starlink, now created by Elon Musk, has thousands and thousands of networks across the country. They built basically a constellation of capability that would make it possible, if we all agreed that this was necessary, that we could light up Wi-Fi services to every kid with every phone everywhere in the world. So imagine if now we've taken places that have been dark, not just in remote corners of Africa, here in the United States. We have communities that don't have adequate Wi-Fi in their school. So with this constellation of satellite capability, we could light up Wi-Fi today to every person on the planet. Now, it's a function of money, but again, if all the governments got together and said, we're going to support this to help educate our people, you could make that affordable to virtually every human on the planet. So let's say now we have connectivity. What I'm seeing is an infrastructure that we would build. So once the connectivity is there, already most of us have devices, but where we don't have devices, we could provide devices. Then if we could harness the power of the very best learning tools, the very best literacy tool, the very best math tool, and make at least a basic set of tools available via satellite to every kid with every phone anywhere in the world. Now we could then let classrooms access this, and a teacher now has access to the very best tools, the very best professors and teachers, lecturers anywhere in the world, the best AI tutors that can help tutor in math or in literacy anywhere in the world. Here's what's possible. If we build this infrastructure, it's kind of like saying the president of any country could say, I want high-speed rail in every city in my country. Good objective. But no one's telling them you have to lay the track first. To have high-speed rail, you have to have tracks. Well, to have education available to everyone, we have to have the tracks. We have to have the infrastructure. But the tools exist today between Wi-Fi capability everywhere in the world, Meta glasses, cell phones, tablet PCs. The tools are there. How do we build this infrastructure and let everybody have access to it? Then, once everyone has access to the tools, what I hope for is to encourage leaders to stand up. In Malawi, not too far from South Africa, they made a commitment that they're going to provide a tablet PC with an AI tutor to have every student that enters the first grade have functional literacy by the time they do. So imagine a country like Malawi with 100% literacy. How about South Africa? If we have the ability to teach 2 languages by the time you enter the first grade, every student in South Africa able to read and write in 2 languages. If you just think about that alone as the platform from which we could grow human learning, I think we are on the cusp of having the greatest equalizer of opportunity that humanity has ever seen. We've talked for as long as humans have been on the planet, we've talked about the need for equal opportunity. We now have within our reach the tools to truly make this possible if we're serious about it.
I want to ask you, it's very interesting, and do you think we're now 5 years away? Well, no, not actually 5. We are 4 years away from achieving the Sustainable Developmental Goals, and one of them is inclusive education. Do you think we are far from it, or do you think we are achieving it?
I'm sorry, the word, you cut out for a second. Achieving
Yeah,
what?
are we achieving it? Do you think we are on the right path internationally?
To achieving what?
The Sustainable Developmental Goals, especially on
Oh,
education.
sustainable environmental goals.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's got different meanings all over the world. So environmental goals. I come from a disability advocacy perspective, so apologies for my language.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. I do think it is very possible. I think, again, it comes back to education. The biggest obstacle to sustainable environmental goals is ignorance, because not everyone is convinced it's even important. Not everyone is convinced that we should do the right things. So I do believe if we can elevate human learning to truly understand what's needed, then we can establish worldwide goals and achieve them, because now we have measurability and accountability. But it all comes back to education, because if we don't have an educated populace across the planet, then we have people doing things that are counter to the sustainable future of humanity.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's so true what you're saying. I wanted to ask you a lot of questions when it comes to your businesses that you run, being the former CEO of 7-Eleven and Blockbuster, but our conversation turned to a very important topic when you look particularly at sustainability of education, which I really appreciate, and it's something that we can also continue discussing. But I want to ask you quick thing. I was dying to ask you this. Uh, where does the name Renaissance Man come from?
I think I've been called that from time to time, only because I do many things. I paint, I like sculpture, I fly airplanes, I play sports, and I run businesses. So I like to do a lot of things. And the concept of Renaissance man comes from the Renaissance period, during the 1800s or late 1700s, when people like, or no, I'm sorry, even earlier, when people like Da Vinci would be able to be an artist, be a scientist, be a doctor, um, be an astronomer. They had a broad range of knowledge and interests that allowed them to do many things. And to some extent, I will never be a Da Vinci, but but I believe it's important to exercise my creative side. I believe it's important to exercise my scientific side, my knowledge of science, um, and engineering principles, et cetera, because the more you learn, the more you not only can do, but the more you understand others, which I think is such a big element. I feel that I have something to learn from every person walking this planet. And to the extent that I can learn from them, then what I will take away from that encounter, that discussion, is more knowledge for me that will help me do more and make me candidly a more interesting person, I think. It's somewhat selfish,
Yeah.
actually, but in a good
But
way, I think.
yeah, they call it neuroplasticity in the field which I'm currently working in, where your brain develops new neurons. Um, and the interesting concept that I familiarized myself is called neurogain. Basically, it's derived from the word called deaf gain, blind gain, but your ability to learn new skills. Um, for your ability to be able where your brain adapts to the circumstances and learn new skills. For instance, we see it. For instance, people that are, for instance, that are blind, but their hearing is so intense.
Yes,
It's quite amazing, and the brain is an amazing masterpiece.
it's a, it's incredible. I'm so glad you brought up neuroplasticity, because now I'm trying to learn neuroscience. I've become a student of neuroscience, And here's something I'll share that I think you'll find interesting. I put in the book, as you know, a chapter on fear and how fear is one of the biggest obstacles to humans. Well, I realized one day after coming out of one of my pilot training sessions, because to fly, for the privilege of flying, I fly a jet at 40,000 feet. So I have to train with the professional pilots. And they put me in a simulator and they basically scare me to death for about 3 days with all kinds of catastrophic problems that they're throwing to not only test my ability to overcome those problems and correct them, but here's what they're doing. It's neuroplasticity. And I just realized this a couple of years ago coming out because, as you said, we have 86 billion neurons up here. Our brain is a computer, it's a supercomputer. But like computers, it works off of patterns. And we come prepackaged out of the box when we're born with an important pattern to protect us from being eaten by a tiger on the savannah, uh, or to keep from crashing our car. It's called fear, and it triggers the amygdala, and it keeps us alive. But today, dial forward from the time when we were cavemen, we don't have natural predators, and yet we still have those patterns locked into our computer. And if we don't change those patterns, then we'll go through our entire life letting fear dominate our reaction to everything. So we see that, what I call in the book, I called it the caveman brain. We see that show up in the boardroom. We see it show up in government, where people are ready to have fist fights over what? Nothing is serious enough to fight about, right? Why are we still blowing people up with bombs and rockets? It's that very caveman-like behavior that causes these kinds of reactions. So with neuroplasticity, again, through education, because education helps us rewire our brain. When I'm studying to be a pilot, through repetition and through knowledge, I'm eliminating that fear response. And when something happens in the cockpit, I have a couple of memory items. So I know how to respond through memory items. I do step one, step two, and then I reach for my checklist, which represents knowledge, data. I'm solving the problem with facts. I'm not reacting. I'm not freezing out of fear. I'm not ready to rip the wings off the plane because I'm going to fight with it. No, instead, my neuroplasticity has caused me to rewire my response to a crisis so I can behave in a more rational, human fashion, not a caveman fashion. I call that my aviator brain versus my caveman brain. And neuroplasticity is what makes the difference between an aviator and a caveman. And I'll wrap that all up by saying, when I teach this, when I've been using this, I did a couple of commencement speeches, and I open with, I'm going to teach you to fly. And by fly, I mean the acronym FLY, first lead yourself. Manage your own mind. Manage your own ability to respond in a more practical fashion, and you'll manage your own future.
Oh, this is amazing. And I'm glad that I could help you interpret your experience. Because that's what it does, and that is why we put fear into practice. Jim, I really want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You are a living legend and you are basically made a significant difference, especially all over the world, especially in a rural place in South Africa. I want to ask you one more thing, and
Sure.
as I mentioned before, we are in a stage where I'm driving this campaign of writing a national autism strategy for employment, for inclusive education, for reasonable accommodations for autistic people, but also considering the broader neurodiversity movement. And, we are currently in phase two of this process. And what I'm asking for, and look, usually in this podcast, which form part of this, is basically to gather support for this project, because this will change millions of people's lives. This will actually put policy into practice. And what I want to ask you though is if you could, and that's what I usually do at the end of these conversations. I usually ask the guests just to reintroduce themselves and just say the following words. Um, your name and surname, and say, I support neurodiversity.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jim Keyes, um, author of Education is Freedom. The future is in your hands. And of course, I believe that education is the answer to neurodiversity and allowing everyone to be able to achieve their full potential by allowing education delivered in the right fashion that can allow each of us, even if we are neurodiverse, we are all in some fashion having a learning disability. Even Einstein had obstacles to his learning. So the question is, how do we now use the power of technology that's at our fingertips and the power of knowledge to help everyone overcome whatever disability they have and harness the power of knowledge to achieve their full potential?
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for the work that you are doing. And, you changed a lot of people's lives, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for sharing your story. I mean, it warms my heart to think that I am out there making a difference, and you're such a good role model, and I applaud the work you're doing with others who need your help. And thank you for doing what you're doing. Anything I can do to help you, count on me.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it.